Hey everyone, it is Rachel Augusta, and I work with animals who are sick, injured, diseased, abused, have suffered physical or emotional trauma in their lives, and are just in need of some serious deep healing. And today I am talking with one of my very favorite people on this planet, Keira. And Keira is just amazing, and she's part of this Women Holding Women series, which is what I have decided to call it because that is what it is about. It's about women coming together with their genius, with their expertise, and holding other women that might need it. Now, Keira is, I met her last September or October, coming up on a year ago in Sedona. And we met through the Women Speak program. She's in my mastermind. And I remember the first time, Keira, that I met you. I remember the first time you walked through the room. I think you were a little late to the foundations class.
Yeah.
Had your car broken down?
I was gonna drive our car that kind of does break down, and so on the way there, I stopped at my parents' house, picked up their truck, and then I went. So then I was late.
Yeah, so she was late, but if you'll get to know Keira, like it had just completely stressed her out to run into a room full of women late. So she was kind of like a hot mess coming in, but in the most beautiful and sweet way. And the minute she walked in, was like, sorry, I was afraid my car was going to break down. I had to go get something from my parents. I was like, who is this person? I love her. And I knew in that moment, I was like, that woman would have been one of my BFFs in high school. I knew it like immediately, just the way you energetically came into the room. And I've just like loved you ever since that moment. But my love for you has really grown as I've gotten to know your work in this world. And that's why I'm so excited to share you with everyone. And I want to just tell everyone, give everybody just a snippet of who you are and what you've been doing and what you've been working on. Keira is a mother to 5 amazing kids, and watching her kids on Facebook and Instagram is just so great because they're so creative, just like she is. And there's just so much love in your family. And she's also an inspirational speaker, and she loves to share the message of hope and light with all of those around her. And as we speak today, you're going to really see that. Keira is an intuitive, energetic healer, and she's the creator of the Awaken Program. Now, one of her most favorite roles is being the host of the Awaken Podcast Show, which I have had the pleasure of being on. And if you haven't checked it out, you really, really need to, because she brings such amazing truth and nuggets of wisdom through that podcast. And this is where she shares her message of awakening and living life through from our divine greatness. Last August, right before I met Keira, she'd published her very first book, The Hidden Gifts Within the Trauma of Sexual Abuse. And right now she's working on her second book, Warriors of Light. And these are stories of hope and healing. Keira has spent the last 17 years in the world of healing. And she's a believer that when we address our trauma pain, we awaken our deepest gifts. She loves to teach women how to heal their own physical and emotional pain through the Awaken Program, which is a digital course on healing. And when she isn't spreading her message of awakening, she loves to spend her time in the mountains with her family, reading books and dancing. Hi, Keira.
Hello. Oh, it's so fun. It's so fun to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So the first time I saw you speak was actually in Sedona. And you have this amazing talent of bringing a ton of tears to people who listen to you.
It's right now.
It's like, I'm not a churchgoer, but when I sit in front of you, I feel like, oh my God, this is the church I needed. Why doesn't this exist? And I just start crying and crying. And like, I can't listen to you speak without just having my heart in my throat and tears rolling down my face, because what you speak is the truth. And I think it's something that all women can relate to, whether they have trauma or not, whether they have dealt with their trauma or not, whether they've tapped into it or not. It's when you speak, it triggers the neuron receptors in the gut and in the heart to start like kind of opening things up to what you're saying.
Oh my gosh. You're so kind and generous. I felt the same way when I heard you stand up and speak. I mean, it was such a beautiful space because we were like in this tiny room and there was like 13 of us. So it was very intimate. And I remember when you spoke, I just was like, she's gonna be my friend. Like, I just knew that about you. Like, I just knew, like, she's going to be my friend. And I immediately was like, be in my group. I like you. And I would have never been able to see what this past year has brought for us. It's just been extraordinary path that we've been able to walk together. So I'm just very grateful to know you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we've all had those moments or sensations where you're just like, oh my gosh, I love you. I need you in my life. And but it actually is that, like, I need you in my life. You're part of my soul's journey. And when you have that moment, you're supposed to connect with those people because it's part of your evolutionary process. And I know that's, why you came into my world and vice versa. Like we know each other, our cells know each other. Mm. And so I'm curious to know, because you really deal with trauma and you think that, or you believe really that it's the pain and trauma that can break you open into your greatness.
Yes, I do. I believe this because this was my story. My story was I always, like, this sounds strange, but I remember at 18, I went to my first like self-help seminar, and it was like this thing inside of me like told me, like, you got something to say. You got something to do in this world. And I was like, what is it? What is it? And I spent the next, I don't know, forever, years and years and years, really living below what I was supposed to be doing. And I really wasn't happy. And I had 5 children, and I was like, this is what I've been wanting to do my whole life. Why am I not finding my happiness? And I actually stopped dreaming. Like, I remember it was my birthday, and my husband took me out to dinner, and he looked at me straight in the eyes and said, what are your dreams for this year? And I just started bawling.
How old were you when this happened?
I think I was turning 32.
32 when your husband took you out for your birthday. And so on your 32nd birthday, it was like, so what do you want to do with your next year?
What is this? And maybe it was my 33rd. I don't know. They all kind of like start to melt together.
Right. Early 30s.
Early 30s. We're sitting at this, actually like this beautiful, table in the Cheesecake Factory. And he's like, well, what do you dream for this year? And I started sobbing. And I was like, I have no dreams left. Like, I literally cannot even imagine anything in my life. And he just looked at me straight in the eyes, and he said, you have 5 days to come up with 3 dreams. And it was like that thing where like someone just has to kind of like kick you out of it. Like, no, let's get going. What are you doing? And so I prayed for 5 months, every single day. God, what's my purpose? Like, I know I'm a mom and I know that's my purpose, but like, I'm like also like Keira. And there's something inside of me that I know I'm supposed to do. And I have nothing, no idea, no dreams, nothing left. And for 5 months, this was just an everyday prayer. And I kept being like, when is this going to be answered? How long is this prayer going to happen? And it was answered in a way that I would have never in a million years imagined it being answered. And it was that my trauma memories of being sexually abused as a child, I had always remembered them, but there was an event in my life that triggered them to come to the front. But like, they'd always been there, but it was like, I'm fine. I'm totally functional. Whatever. Life goes on. I'm super strong. Like, that was just always my motto in life. It's like, well, I'm super strong. I can deal with anything that just happened to me as a kid, letting it go. but I never really dealt with it, right? Like I really ran from it my whole life. I ran from dealing with the pain. I ran from dealing with doing any sort of healing work around it. Like as much as I had been in the healing world, that just was like not what I wanted to deal with, you know? Right. And so this event occurred that triggered them to the front. And it was the deepest pain I'd ever experienced. And it also shattered my belief system of everything. It was like I stopped, like I'm a big God girl. And in that moment, I was like, pretty sure there is no God. And you take that away from someone who is a God person, who's lived their whole life in communication and belief, and it was just all shattered for me. And that moment where I was like, if there's no God, there's this much pain, not going to stay here. So I really contemplated taking my life. And when I chose not to, and I chose to stay, I chose to let the pain refine me. And it was like, life has never looked the same since. It was the pain that was the answer to my prayer.
Okay, so that's amazing. And I have a question for you. So your husband asked you, what are your goals this year? Come up with 3 in 5 days. It sent you into a 5-month freak out.
Yeah.
So he gave you 5 days. It turned into 5 months that down spiraled you into such a depressive state that you contemplated taking your own life.
Yes.
Your husband had no idea that that sort of question would be so triggering.
And here's what's so interesting, right? Is like, I'm a super like deep conversation, self-help, healing. Those are the things I want to talk about all the time. That's not my husband. So for him to have even asked me that and to have given me that suggestion, or really it was more of like, yes, this is what you need to do. I just feel like it was so divinely spoken, because it's what led me to ultimately what I do now, was that moment in time. And that's why I have everything is called the awakening, because when I woke up to what I was supposed to do, when I woke up to my pain, like life has never looked the same. And that's what I truly believe about an awakening. And I know that experience happened for you. We talked a lot about that on the show.
Yeah. And we can talk about that too. So I am curious, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but you had sexual trauma happen to you in childhood.
Yeah.
And you never had any sort of therapy or counseling, really anything.
No. Yeah.
And then you just sort of, through fear, I'm assuming, did your parents know?
Yeah, they knew. And I mean, they were both therapists, right? So I think it scared the crap out of them, and they froze. And actually, I just have like a lot of compassion on them. My mom comes from a really long line of sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is usually it's usually a generational pattern that gets passed down, and it shows up different ways. But most likely, if it was in your parents' line, it's going to show up somewhere in your life, right? And so me being her first, and that probably her worst fear in the whole entire world ever happening, I have compassion on her, because I know
what to do.
You know what to do, and it threw her into her pain, and there's just like so much understanding of where they were. And because one of the things about trauma is that everyone deals with it differently. And for me, I speak a lot about this in my book, is that my massive effect was perfectionism. So the second I felt the shame of when I told my parents, like the shame that showed up and the fear, I was like, well, if I'm so perfect forever, this never has to happen again. And no one has to know the darkness that happened to me, because no one will ever guess. Right? So it just like was so perfect all the time.
How old were you when you thought that?
5. Right? So that, I feel like they also were like, well, she's doing great. Because that was really my whole role that I took on, was like, Like, I'm just going to jam at life. And I did, and I succeeded and I did well. But I was also a dancer, and that was like God's gift for me, because I was a contemporary dancer, which means you really get to feel emotions. And that was just the most beautiful way for me to let my pain out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And, honestly, in that, like, that time period, there just wasn't a lot of conversation around this. And I don't think parents knew what to say about it or deal with it in the same way that they do today.
Yeah.
I mean, I think parents even today don't really know how to deal with it. Not everybody does, but there's a little bit more conversation around it now, I think. And yeah, so there's no blame. Everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. But so as a child, you thought, okay, well, I will be perfect. And the shame of this is forcing me to hide the darkness and only show light.
Yeah. And to speak on this, because there are maybe people who their children have been sexually abused. I personally, this is just my personal belief, I do not believe that there is a right way to deal with the situation. I feel like every mother has their own ability and their instincts to know what's the best thing for their kid. Maybe it's not the best thing for a little kid to go to a therapist and have all of the people interviewing them and asking them, like, maybe you like just love them and hold them and take them through that time, right? So it's like, I don't think there's a right way. I think the best thing ever, though, is to always let people know, like, you are so loved, even if this happened. None of this is your fault. You are amazing. And just build up so that because what's so interesting is I wouldn't say my abuse is what created all the effects. Like, I'm sure it did at some level. When you're 5, you don't really know what's bad and what's good.
Mm-hmm.
But the trauma for me was the moment I told my parents and I felt them, because I'm a high feeler. So of course I was able to feel like first of all, I'm sure they were just rageful that this happened, right? But like so much shame of being a parent, like how in the hell did I not protect my kid? But it's like, you can't always protect them, no matter how protective you are. And they were really good parents. So I think there's just this space of like total compassion for everybody in the situation, you know?
Yeah, that shame. I mean, I'm actually listening to Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, right now, and she's talking so much about shame and what happens in shame, and your parents having shame and you having shame, and then it's real, like it's a real thing. And so basically, it wasn't until you were in your 30s that all of a sudden your husband's like, "What are your goals in life?" And you're like, and like. He took the sheet on a table that was nicely, like beautifully set up, and he pulled it out from under you, and everything came crumbling and breaking down all around you.
100%. And it's so interesting. Like, I don't wear the wedding ring that I was married with. We got married 17 years ago. I got married real young. And my daughter found it yesterday. And she was like, "Why don't you wear this?" And I put it on because I was like, "Crap, I don't want to lose it right now." And I kept looking down at it, and I was like, I stopped wearing this ring when my awakening happened, because it was like I had become born into a different human, and I can't wear something I'd worn my whole, pretty much like half my life, because it was a remembrance of like who I once was. And like, it was so weird to wear that ring, because I realized how much I just, it was like a rebirth. It was just a rebirth when this pain hit, you know?
Yeah. So you down spiraled and you became suicidal because you were like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. You were dealing with so much trauma that everything was like opening and it exposing itself to you. Like your cells were remembering everything, and it just down spiraled you. So how did you get from there to like, what was the transition? Where did you put the brakes on and go, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? Like,
Yeah.
again, like it's interesting that you're like, what am I doing with my life? Wait, what am I doing with my life? Wait, what am I doing with my life? Like, it's like a plot change.
So I will say, there's always effects from trauma, and one of them was suicidal ideation. I'd had it since I was 14. No one knew, like no one knew that I struggled with these, like, it was like demons, right? Like it was like the ideation of suicide was always there. And yet, like, if you knew me, I was probably the happiest kid at the high school, right? Like dancing in my car every day, just.
Well, I mean, Robin Williams.
Right.
There's so many people that Kate Spade, where you're like, you're happy, you're successful. I mean, myself as well. Like, and I've had a lot of childhood trauma.
Yeah.
I was raped. I've experienced some really hard things in my life. And I'm with you. I understand it. What term did you use? Suicidal what?
It's called suicide ideation. It's the term that they use for when you struggle with having a lot of suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hand raised. And that's uncomfortable for me to say because I don't share that very often. I've done a lot of trauma work this year. I've worked with a trauma mentor. I've just done my own personal work. I've met people like you who've talked me through things, or I've I've been exposed to a lot of healing things. And even though I'm a healer in this world and I work with animals, I'm happy. I was a circus sideshow performer, vaudevillian. I went to Second City comedy improv school, graduated there. I was living in Hollywood. Like, I'm the super happy person, but deep in my psyche, and sometimes not even that deep, I was like, I really don't want to be here. And if anything would happen, it could trigger that pretty easily in me. Mm-hmm. I even noticed that it would be triggered pretty easily just with PMS.
Yeah.
Like my PMS was enough to, like, my hormonal change was enough to bring me into that. So sometimes it was monthly where I was like, I can't take this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, really what always kept me here was my fur baby. Like always, it was Holly and then Sugar Pants, and that's hard to say. It's uncomfortable to say to people like, yeah, I've had these thoughts. It was my babies, your babies, my babies, that I was like, no, you have to stay here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have had that. And I know it comes from childhood trauma.
Yeah. I say this, because I think it's so interesting. We look at chickenpox and we're like, oh, the effects of chickenpox, or you get like these red dots all over your body. It's just the effects of having the chickenpox. And what I began to realize, and really what freed me from the years and years of suicide ideation, was when I found out that someone I deeply, deeply loved, and we danced the same. We had like the same emotion when we danced. Like we were very like similar. When I found out that she committed suicide, and then I found out that she had the exact same trauma as me. Like literally, like my babysitter sexually abused me. Her babysitter sexually abused her. And it was like this moment in time where I was able to step back and I saw, this is just an effect. This isn't anything to do with me. I was sexually abused. One of the effects is that I've had to deal with suicide ideation my whole life. Just an effect. And it freed me from it because it was no longer about me. It was no longer like, oh, I'm the worst human ever. Who has these thoughts? Who has 5 kids and has these thoughts? It was like, no, this is an effect, which means I actually have power over it. And that was so freeing for me.
See, I'm crying again. I'm like, oh my God. But it's true because it allows you to like let go of the shame of it. You're like, this is a side effect to something that happened.
Yeah.
I can't make myself wrong for it.
No. And for me that day when it was like everyone was at school, I was by myself, and I know I just had a phone call with the hotline because I was just like, I'm a freaking mess. I need help. I called the hotline and she just was like, you got to get some help. like, this is something you've got to get help with. And it was like, oh my gosh, she's not even, like, nobody can help me. And it was like, I feel like I hear God quite often. And it was like, God was gone, like gone. Nobody was there. Everything was silent. And I was like, hey, this is it. And then it was like something deep inside of me, something that I could not actually control, grabbed my phone and called my neighbor. And she didn't pick up. And I was like, well, I guess it's over. She didn't even pick up. And then she called right back. And I just said, I'm about to commit suicide. And she was like, I'm over. And she came over and sat with me for 2 hours. And I just screamed and I yelled and I was just pissed. And this is where, like, I cannot deny God's hand, because 2 years before we had moved into this house, brand new community, built from the ground. How is it that out of the millions of people who live in Arizona, my neighbor happened to be a student who was in a healing course with me 2 years prior, who knew my whole story? I wouldn't have called a single soul and told them that, except for her, because she had been sexually abused. She had tried to commit suicide. She had been in a hospital, right? Only God could have pulled that together. How was it that she was my neighbor, right?
Right.
And I call her my angel. I know, like, God created that space, because that day had to happen for me. Like, I had to go to the end of the end. And I had some pretty miraculous experiences. As soon as she left and I went, I had some experiences I like literally cannot explain, except that they were so symbolic to me that it was my time to be reborn, and it was my time to step forward and do the work I was called to do. And I said yes. And as soon as I said yes, 4 months later, I had the call to write this book. I wrote the book in 3 months with 5 kids and 1 computer in our household, which means my husband took our computer every day to work. I got up at 5 a.m. to write a book. And like that for me was part of my healing. But it was like, to work with God in writing a book was the most sacred experience of my life. And it all came from ending, like, that end of like, nope, like, I am done. I'm never going to stay here. And then choosing to reach out for help. And then having all of these experiences from there is where it all changed for me.
Wow. When you were writing your book, was it like with the intent of, I just need to journal this out? Or was it like you were being divinely channeled to share your story to, like, help other women? Was that like you could feel that channel coming through you?
There are chapters that I read through and I don't remember writing a single word. Like,
wow.
I don't even write. And the way it was given to me, like, it was actually two Julys ago, right? So it was 2 years ago in July. I had received some email from a blogger that said, you should write a book. Like, it was just some mass email,
Oh,
right?
yeah, right. Yeah.
And I got it, and it was like light just like hit me, and I was like, what? I didn't even go to college. You can't write a book. I have 5 kids. Nope, that's not even going to happen. But it was like I could hear it every day. You should write a book. You should write a book. So I was like, all right, I'll pray about it. So I'm praying. I pray for 2 weeks every day. Like, whatever. Is there a book for me to write? And I'm driving down the road by myself one day. And all of a sudden, I see literally like this image in front of my face. And I see a book from the top to the bottom. And I see the exact title, The Hidden Gifts Within the Trauma of Sexual Abuse. And I see these palms with this beautiful plant coming out. And it was like, what? And I felt like I got kicked in the stomach, and I'm sobbing. I'm like, I am not writing that book. Are you kidding me? The Hidden Gifts Within? What are you talking about?
Right. Because that's...
like, no, I'm not writing this book. But then within like literally 24 hours, I'd written 2 chapters, and it was just like, I'm writing this book.
Wow.
I never thought I'd be an author. What is, it's just crazy.
Right. So what are some of the hidden gifts within trauma? And is this sexual trauma, or is this all trauma?
I believe it's all trauma. I believe there's gifts in all trauma, but I'm partial to believe because of all the survivors I've met, because this has brought in a lot of survivors into my life.
Because you're working on a new book now where you're actually interviewing survivors, correct?
I'm actually having them write their own chapter.
Okay.
And they write their own chapter of the hope and healing that came from doing their trauma work, right? So it's not going to be their necessary like story of sexual abuse. It's going to be how they've chosen to heal.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but as I've met them all, and I don't know how to say this in a powerful way, except that every single survivor I've met is one of the most extraordinary humans I've ever met. Like, they have this insane light. They have these insane passions. They've got these gifts that I believe the trauma hides. The trauma, like, it's so interesting. I honestly don't think anyone can go through that type of trauma and not become an amazing human if they choose to do healing work, because there's no other kind of trauma that is going to make you dig as deep to heal.
Right.
That's the gift. The gift is that it makes you become an insane seeker. It makes you do work that nobody's going to do. Nobody's going to dive that deep into their crap. But when you have that kind of pain, you're like, I'll do whatever it takes. And that is the gift. The gift is that you now have an opportunity that nobody else gets, which is to dig deep and really become extraordinary humans. Because a lot of people are coasting because they don't have to. There's no pain like on their back, like trying to, chase.
Right. I mean, it's true. It's really true. My trauma happened as a teenager on 3 different occasions, actually. And, and then there was, I didn't tell my parents because my dad's a retired Lutheran minister, and my fear was that they would blame me and after the first occurrence. And so I didn't tell them, but I went to a doctor on my own as a 15-year-old.
Oh.
And she shamed me.
Yeah.
She shamed me for not forcing the guy to wear a condom. And I was like, I was raped.
Yeah.
But she didn't believe that to be true.
Yeah.
And this is a woman. And so she really shamed me. And so it wasn't until, what happened for me was I ended up becoming very sexual. Mm-hmm. That's one of the avenues that is taken.
Yeah.
Some people will, with sexual trauma, you will gain a lot of weight and use that weight as a protection. I didn't. I sought out power in sexual exploitation of other people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I came across a guy in LA who basically threatened to kill me over it because I was sexually messing with him that I was like, I'm really afraid. I'm really afraid of myself.
Yeah.
I don't know what sort of situation I'm going to put myself into. But at that point, I had already been sexually abused on 3 occasions.
Oh.
And so there was so much shame. I had the belief that I put myself in those situations. And if I had not put myself in those situations, it would not have happened. One of them was when I was traveling through Europe. And so out on the street, because I had been robbed and we didn't have money to stay in youth hostels or anything. So we would just sleep out on the street. And that was where one of the times happened. And so I blamed myself for that. And, if I would have been smarter, if I would have tried to find a proper place to stay at night, if I would have, you come up with all these things. So by the time that happened in Los Angeles, I was like, I'm really afraid of what situation I might put myself in. So I found therapy, and I spent the first 6 months like lying. Like I didn't tell her the truth at all about why I was there because I had so much shame around it.
Yeah.
But the truth is that I was in a domestic violence relationship or situation as a child. I had an older sister who it was actually very, very abusive. She was 6 years older than me. She was very physically abusive, and my parents didn't protect her against me or my other siblings. And she did horrible, horrible, horrible things to us. You know, like would cut my nails with butcher knives.
Oh, no, I can't hear it. Oh, it's too hard.
Yeah. So just really difficult things. And it wasn't until a switch happened for me last summer. You know, I was dating somebody who broke up with me in a text message after being together for 2 years, and we were happy. I was like, how does this happen? Like, how did I end up here? How did this happen to me? Well, I don't understand. And then I started journaling. How have I ended up with people who abandoned me? Why do I choose people who abandoned me? Oh my God. And I started like backtracking and go, well, how did I get raped at the age of, not that I'm blaming myself, but how did I end up there? Then how did I end up with a sociopath?
Yeah.
And then how did I, oh my God, my sister. And I kept backtracking until I got to the end, and I was like, bleh. And like once it was written out, essentially, I just crumbled because I was like, oh my God, I was an invisible child. I couldn't go to my parents. You know, there was so much. I was abused as a child by my older sister. Of course, I ended up in situations where I wasn't protected. Of course, I ended up in situations where I didn't know how to value myself. Of course, I was in all of these things. So I did all of this trauma work, which is so intense.
Yes.
It's so intense. But, you know, the thing is that like I did therapy when I was a teenager, but I really didn't do my deep trauma work until this last year because I was like, I don't want to repeat these patterns anymore.
Yeah.
But I've been working with animals for 6 years now.
Yeah.
And so do you think that it's only really possible for people to tap into their gifts of trauma once they've dealt with it? Or do you think that it's trying to break through and peer its light in different ways, even if it hasn't been? What's your thoughts?
100%. I think the biggest lie is that you have to be healed to be a healer. It's just like bullcrap because we're really just instruments. We're like people who just get to channel and do what work needs to be done. That doesn't mean that we're like, you know, enlightened beings who have all of our crap together. You know, like I started massaging when I was 16. I literally wanted to heal so bad. I wanted to heal other people that at 16, I went, I trained with a therapist. I began massaging all my cousins for $10 an hour because I was just like,
always the entrepreneur.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was just this crazy like desire to help, you know? And then I started doing energy healing work. I don't know how many years before this all hit, probably 4 years before all of this hit. I had started being trained in muscle testing, which is like a form of energetic healing. And then it just like, I was doing amazing work. It had nothing to do with the fact that it was because I was like healed. It was because I believe if you are a yes, miracles happen. You know, I was a yes to heal people. I was a yes to do work. So it was able to come forward. But when I chose to do all of my healing work, so rapid eye therapy is what I did after this whole situation occurred. I got myself into seeing a rapid eye therapist, and I did a lot of work with her, and it was heavy, and it felt like every time I left her office, someone had like peeled my skin off, you know, it was like that pain. And yet it was the most transformative time of my life. And it just took the work I had been doing and it just blasted the ceiling off, right? It was like, all right, there's no limit now because there's no more cage trying to hold it in.
Totally. Yeah. And you know, and it's like, I don't know if you feel this way, but I'm so grateful now for how, like, not the abuse or anything like that. But I'm so grateful for the switch that triggered it all. I'm, you know, for the guy who broke up with me in a text message, I'm like, oh, Thank you.
Right?
Thank you for breaking the vase.
Yes.
And like on the surface, and you talk about this, but like too, I was like, yeah, on the surface, I'm this happy person, but on the surface, I'm like, I'm a successful businesswoman. I'm an entrepreneur. I work with animals. I am a healer. I'm a practitioner. I do this, I do that. But like underneath, it was like clink, you know, like you just tap it with your nail and then it all broke apart. I was like, oh God, like I've thought many times like, wow, if that wouldn't have happened, I wonder what would have happened.
Yeah.
I wonder what if I would have been one of those like 60 or 70-year-old people that's like, I don't know why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, like essentially spent my whole life, or, you know, in your 80s unhappy and you're not really sure why. And you know, and I want to say, like, since I've done my trauma work, I don't have those suicidal thoughts.
Yep. Yeah.
You're not there.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not to say that it won't ever happen ever again, because I'm under no illusion that, you know, things can't change. But since I've done the work and gone deep into those places and like had your skin ripped off and then put back on, like I'm like, yeah, I don't have them anymore.
That's so beautiful.
And so I can't imagine, you know, going your whole life, but so many people do go their whole life and they're like, they don't know. So let me ask you, like, you know, how do you help women, you know, and helping them awaken to their gifts when they've been in these horrible places of trauma? Like what are some of the first steps, or how do you do that?
Yes. And I'm so embarrassed because I didn't tell you this, but in 5 minutes, I have to pick my son up from preschool.
All right. You better answer that really quick.
But I will tell you what I do. Okay. So, and I'm in my closet, just so all people watching.
We're Earth Angels on Earth, you guys.
This is what we do when we're moms. I hide in closets and do interviews. So I created a program, and it's not just for survivors, but it definitely helps, right? And it's called the Awaken Program. And I do all my healing work through the chakras. And so what I did was like, how do I teach people to do this on their own? Because as much as I love people coming to me, it was like a missing piece. And the piece was that they had to use me to get to their healing, where I believe everyone has an inner healer, and I believe everyone has inner gifts. And so I created a digital program to teach them all about their chakras, but more so a practice, a 10-minute practice that they can do every day. Now, if they've never dealt with their trauma, that needs to be dealt with first. They need to go to Rapid Eye. They need to do something trauma work. This is not the first step. This is, you've done your work. Now you want a daily practice to keep your energy levels high so that you can really magnify your time with your gifts. And what's so fun, and I will say this, is that the women in my group who do their practice every day are freaking changing their lives. They've had lower back. One of them had lower back pain for like, I don't know, 5 years. She does her practice every day, has no back pain.
Amazing.
And it's not because of me. It's because she's doing the work. And that's the magic for me, that I can be like, it's all you. I taught you, but you're doing it. I had another one who literally like manifested a whole new job out of doing her work every day. And it just showed up. And I'm like, and what's so fun is the confidence that comes from women, because they're the ones who are doing the work, and they can be like, oh my gosh, I have this insane power I didn't know I had.
Oh my God. Okay. I love that. I'm going to put a link so that they can find it. And I'm like talking fast so that you can go and get your son, because this is real life. But real quick, you have a gift that you want to give everybody, right?
Yes.
What is it, real quick?
So I just feel like we all have a lot of stress. All of our adrenal system, like our adrenal nerves are just like shot, especially if you've had trauma. Trauma puts you in fight and flight, which means that your adrenals are running all the time. And so I created a meditation, it's very short, that walks you through healing your nervous system, calming down your adrenals. And it is so powerful, and it's just a beautiful first step to doing healing work on yourself. It's awesome. Like we think healing has to be so hard. And it really is, it doesn't have to be.
Awesome. So I'm going to give links, and they'll have links to your free gift, to your book, to your podcast, to your social media. They'll know how to get in touch with you. And I really, really recommend that everybody do that. Do that because Keira is so great and I love her.
Well, I love you. And I'm so sorry I have to run.
No, that's okay. To be continued. We can do this again.
Okay. I would love that.
Okay. I love you.
Love you too.
Bye.